The desert wind screamed like a banshee that morning, cutting through the rocky gulches with a voice old as the bones buried beneath the sand. Clara Belle Wright ran, barefoot, blood-slicked, heart hammering. Behind her, the crack of a gunshot cracked the stillness. She didn't flinch. She'd flinched at the first one, the one that missed her ear by inches. That part of her, the girl who flinched, was back on the porch of her father's house, already dead. Her skirt caught on a mesquite thorn, ripping like the sound of her old life tearing apart. She didn't look back. Couldn't. The moon still hung in the sky like a guilty eye, and all around her, the desert glared with suspicion. She wasn't made for this, not really. Clara Belle had grown up with clean dresses and hard hand. She'd stitched samplers, recited scripture, and learned to pour tea with quiet grace while her mother watched with an expression that never softened. But inside her chest, something restless had always burned. She felt it first at 13, when she saw a hawk catch the wind and vanish above the cliff. At 15, it stirred stronger, when she heard a traveling poet speak of places east of the Mississippi, of cities with street lamps and rivers that glittered with light. But it didn't roar to life until she met him. Toya. She stumbled now, half blinded by sweat and grit, and nearly tumbled down a dry creek bed. Catching herself on a jagged rock, she hissed as it cut deep into her palm. Blood welled, bright and honest. A part of her wanted to laugh. How many times had her father warned her about wandering? How many times had her brother Eli snickered that she'd die of snakebite or shame? No, it wouldn't be a snake. It would be them. She pressed on, lungs burning. The land knew him. That was what she'd first noticed. Toya moved through the canyons like he belonged to them. No matter the path, he never left a print unless he wanted to. When he walked, animals went quiet, not in fear but in recognition. She'd met him near the waterhole where her mare had spooked at a coyote. Clara had fallen hard and twisted her ankle. Her shouts echoed across the ravine until a shadow emerged from the cottonwoods. He didn't speak right away. Just knelt, eyes level with hers, and offered her his canteen. "Water," he said. His voice had a gravity that pulled her in. He'd patched her ankle with a strip of yucca fiber and showed her how to walk without limping. He asked no questions. She returned the next day. And the day after that. At first, she told herself she was curious. About his people, about the old stories. He told them like painting the sky. Tales of coyote tricksters and stars that used to walk. She listened, wide-eyed, marveling not just at the tales but the way he told them, like he could speak to the land itself. Then came the day he reached to brush a tumbleweed seed from her hair. His fingers brushed her cheek, and she forgot every hymn she'd ever been forced to memorize. They met in secret, beneath sandstone overhangs, under stars so vast they made Clara feel like a single ember in a prairie fire. "I think I was meant to find you," she'd whispered once, as they watched the bats dance across the dusk. Toya had only smiled. "Or maybe you were always here, just waiting to remember." It had been foolish to believe they could hide forever. She thought of his hands now, steady, warm, calloused from carving flutes and skinning deer. She thought of the way he looked at her, not like she was fragile but like she was fire. How could something so whole, so real, be called wrong? She climbed higher into the rocks, the sun beginning to rise behind her. Each step felt heavier, like the weight of her family's hate was tied to her boots. But she had no boots, just torn stockings and raw feet. She crested a ridge and dropped behind a boulder. For a moment she simply breathed, eyes squeezed shut. Her father would shoot Toya without hesitation. Samuel Wright believed in two things: God's judgment and his own. Everything else was a threat to be extinguished. Clara knew what her father had done during the war. Knew the smell of gun oil and the stories whispered between old veterans who still bore the gray. She'd once seen him choke a man in town for calling Toya civilized. And Eli, her younger brother, always watching, always silent until the moment came to betray. Clara's hands trembled. Not from fear. From rage. They'd decided last night. She'd heard them. "The girl's no better than a whore now," Samuel had said. "We'll take him out past the ravine. The girl too, if she resists." And her mother, eyes dry as bones, had said only, "It's the Lord's will." She had taken her mother's rifle from under the bed. Left the house with nothing but it and a prayer to a God she no longer trusted. The first time she'd killed a bird with that rifle, she'd cried for an hour. Now she prayed she wouldn't need it at all. Clara scanned the canyon below. The route they'd planned lay ahead, a ravine that curved west, toward the old Spanish trail. If they made it 2 days out, they'd meet To-ya's uncle, who could guide them to safety. A rustle. Stone against stone. She turned, heart in her throat. He stepped from the shadows, tall and silent as ever. Dust clung to his buckskin, and his dark hair was tied back in a strip of red cloth. His eyes widened when he saw her, and in a heartbeat, they were holding each other, tight as tree roots. "You came early," he whispered. "They know." Her voice cracked. "They're coming. With guns." His body tensed. "How many?" "My father, Eli, and 2 others." He looked past her toward the rising light. "Then we don't go down the ravine. We take the ridge. That's toward the old mine." He nodded. "Too narrow for horses. But we'll have cover." Clara didn't hesitate. She grabbed his hand and they ran. The sun chased them across the sandstone like a spotlight. Hawks circled overhead, their cries sharp as broken glass. The ridge path was narrow, winding, with drop-offs that could swallow them whole. Clara's breath rasped, but she didn't complain. To-ya led without speaking, but every now and then, he looked back, checking her face, not just for fear, but for strength. And he saw it. The girl who once served tea with trembling hands was gone. A distant gunshot cracked through the air. Clara flinched. To-ya pulled her behind a ridge of stone. "They saw our tracks." Her mouth was dry. "What now?" "We split. I'll lead them off. You head to the mine." "No." His eyes locked onto hers. "If they catch me, they'll think you ran. They'll kill you. And if they catch us both, we both die." She clenched her jaw. "I'm not leaving you again." He hesitated. Then, quietly, "We stay together." Clara nodded. She raised the rifle, hands shaking only slightly. "Then let's make them wish they never came." They crept along the ridge, moving low. The sun was higher now, throwing long shadows that danced like ghosts across the rock. A crow shrieked in the distance. They didn't speak. Just moved, breath and footfall. Every step was a gamble. Behind them, voices carried on the wind, Eli's laughter, cruel and thin. "We'll find them," he called. "They're rats in a maze." Clara turned to To-ya. "Let's show them rats can bite." His smile was fleeting, but it lit her like the sun. By midday, they reached a dead tree clinging to the ridge wall. Below it, a narrow ledge led into a cave mouth. To-ya pointed. "We can rest there. If we need to." But rest was a luxury. Clara knew they didn't have time. She turned once more, gazing out over the red land that had once been her prison. Her past was riding behind her, armed and cruel. Her future walked beside her, wounded but unbowed. She took To-ya's hand. They vanished into the shadows. Behind them, the wind howled. The hunt had only just begun. The desert offered no comfort, only a cruel kind of silence. Clara's breath came ragged as she crouched beside To-ya in the narrow crevice between 2 slabs of sun-warmed stone. The wind had died down, and in its absence, the desert became a listener. Every step, every scrape of boot leather, every dry gasp echoed like a bell tolling somewhere far off. To-ya held a flat palm in the air, still as a hawk on the hunt. Listening. Always listening. They had run all night, stumbling through arroyos, past dry cactus fields and whispering creeks, guided only by the moon and his memory of the land. Now the sun had risen, heavy and pitiless, turning the rock around them to fire. Clara blinked against the sweat in her eyes, watching him. There was no fear on his face, only calculation, a flicker of tension at the jawline. His shirt clung to him, streaked with dust and blood. She didn't ask if he was hurt. She would know soon enough. "We stop," she whispered. He shook his head just once. "Too soon." She nodded. Her legs ached. Her mouth was a pit of dust. But they couldn't afford to stop. Not yet. Not with her father and the others close behind. They pushed forward, slipping between rocks, moving with care. To-ya's hand brushed the earth as they went, reading it like a page. He paused now and again to look at the sky or touch a broken plant stem. Each gesture was quiet, deliberate. Clara followed, trusting him completely. She hadn't meant to fall in love. Certainly not with a man her family would rather see dead than fed. But love, as she'd learned, didn't ask permission. It simply bloomed, suddenly, wildly, like desert flowers after rain. They reached a flat stretch of land with low brush and open sky. No cover. To-ya knelt and scanned the distance. "See there," he said, pointing with his chin. "The stone tower." Clara squinted, shielding her eyes. A formation jutted up like a jagged tooth on the horizon. "That's where we're going?" He nodded. "Canyon pass behind it. Leads west." "And they won't follow?" "They'll try." She looked at him, his face turned toward the sun, watching for danger. "You ever get tired of always being hunted?" His eyes flicked toward her. "No. I get tired of being underestimated." They moved again, each step heavier now as the heat climbed. The mule they'd stolen the night before had given out just before dawn. It hadn't screamed, just stumbled, then dropped hard to the ground. To-ya had checked its pulse, whispered something in Navajo, and ended its pain with a knife through the heart. Clara had cried, not for the mule, but for the world they were leaving behind. For the soft lie of safety she could no longer afford to believe in. They traveled for another hour before To-ya raised his hand again. Clara dropped beside him, heart hammering. Ahead, just beyond a rise of reddish earth, voices drifted on the breeze. 3 men. She recognized one instantly, her brother Eli, laughing again in that way that always made her skin crawl. She couldn't hear the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Casual. Confident. Close. "Split left," To-ya whispered. "Keep low." Clara did as he said. She moved around the outcrop, keeping her body tight to the ground. Every rock felt like a blade against her scraped legs. She heard a boot crunch nearby. Someone spit. Then a voice. "You think they'll come through here?" Her father. "If they're smart, they'll head for the river," came another voice, older, gruffer. "But I don't reckon they are." "They're desperate," Eli added, sneering. "And he's injured." Clara froze. Injured? She looked back at To-ya, who had moved behind another stone. His arm was tucked close to his side. She hadn't noticed before. The men moved on, and Clara waited. When silence returned, she scrambled to him. "You're bleeding," she hissed. To-ya didn't look at her. "Just a graze." She reached for him, yanking his shirt aside. A deep furrow sliced across his ribs, crusted with dried blood. The kind of wound that slowed you down. "We have to stop," she said. He shook his head. "We stop, we die. That's what happens if we don't treat this," she snapped. His expression softened, not from pain, but from something deeper. He looked at her like she was light through the trees. "You're not the girl I met. I'm the girl you ran with. That changes a person." They climbed down into a dry gully where the sun didn't reach, and Clara found a patch of shade. She took the cloth from her waist, tore it into strips, and cleaned the wound with water from her canteen. He didn't flinch. "You'll scar," she murmured. "Then I'll remember." They rested briefly, hidden in the shadows. Clara leaned against him, his warmth a comfort she didn't know she'd needed. Above them, a hawk circled. She watched it, remembering that first day by the waterhole, the quiet way he had said her name after she told it to him, like he was trying it out in a song. She might never hear that again. When they moved again, To-ya walked slower, but with determination. The blood had stopped, for now. They reached the base of the stone tower before dusk. Clara collapsed behind a boulder, too tired to speak. Toya scouted ahead, returning with a handful of dry berries and a small clay bottle buried in the sand. My uncle hid supplies here. Long ago. They ate in silence, and when night fell, they built no fire. The stars were their only light, distant and cold. Clara lay beside him, curled on the ground. You think we'll make it? I don't think, he said. I move. I keep moving. She stared up at the sky. I used to think I was going to marry some boy from town. Dress in white. Bake bread. Read psalms. He glanced at her, amused. You don't bake. She laughed softly. I really don't. There was a pause, then his hand found hers. Do you regret it? He asked. She thought about that. About the rifle, the running, the wound on his side. Her father's voice ringing in her ears. No. I only regret waiting so long. They slept in shift. Toya took first watch, eyes always scanning the darkness. When it was her turn, she sat with the rifle across her knees, listening to the wind curl around the rocks. In the hours before dawn, movement stirred below. Shadows, 2, maybe 3. She woke him with a touch. He rose, silent as smoke, and crouched beside her. Below, the bounty hunters moved through the sand, torches flickering. Reeves and Barlow, Toya whispered. Hired killers. From the war. From darker places. The hunters moved with confidence. One of them stopped, knelt, and picked up something from the dirt. Clara's heart seized. My ribbon, she said, horrified. Toya turned to her. We go. Now. They didn't run, there was no point. Not yet. But they moved quickly, weaving through the rocks, climbing higher into the pass. The air thinned, and the wind howled louder here. The sun rose again, blood orange and merciless. By midday, they reached a bluff overlooking the next valley. Below them, the land opened into brush and dry grass, flat and open. Dangerous. Clara shaded her eyes. We can't cross that in daylight. No. She looked at him, at the bandage around his ribs, at the way his shoulders sagged with exhaustion. She ached to rest. But that was a luxury long gone. What if we mislead them? She asked. He turned toward her, intrigued. Set a false trail, she said. Use one of the old horse paths. Leave signs like we went south. Toya considered it. Then he nodded. We'll split up. I'll make the trail. No, she said sharply. We stay together. He held her gaze. There was pride in it, but also fear. You trust me? She asked. With my life. Then let me help save it. They worked quickly. Clara scattered scraps of cloth, left boot prints in soft dirt. Toya broke branches to look like a hasty escape southward. When they circled back, the sun was low. They crawled into a shallow cave in the cliffside and waited. Sure enough, by nightfall, the hunters passed below, torches aimed south. One paused, frowning. But then they followed the signs. Clara exhaled slowly. She looked at Toya. We bought ourselves time. He nodded. Now we move again. They gathered their things in silence. The wind had shifted. Clouds were gathering in the west, dark ones. Clara stood at the mouth of the cave and tasted the storm coming. We'll reach the next pass by morning, Toya said. And after that? There's a place, he said. Hidden. Sacred. My uncle lives there still. If we make it, we're safe. She turned to him, silhouetted by starlight. Then let's make it. And together, they vanished into the dark. The wind shifted sometime near dawn. It carried with it the scent of mesquite smoke and something sour beneath it, sweat, iron, the breath of men too long on a hunt. Clara stirred where she lay curled beside Toya in a hollow beneath the overhang. Her eyes opened slowly, dread blooming before her mind could form the thought. They're close. Toya was already awake, kneeling just outside the shelter, face still, body taut. The morning light made his profile look carved in stone. His hand rested on the haft of his knife. His rifle lay across his lap, loaded and ready. She crawled to him, her voice barely a whisper. How close? He tilted his head. Less than a mile. 3 of them now. They've split up. Her stomach turned to lead. They found our trail? Not yet. But they will. She looked westward, where the land rolled toward a maze of jagged stone and high ridgelines. The sacred place, how far? Half a day if we move fast. She reached for the rifle. Then we don't stop. Toya didn't move. He kept staring into the distance. I'll draw them off. No, her voice cracked. We stay together. That's the only way this ends right. They want me. Not you. They'll kill me just to watch you break. His mouth tightened. He didn't argue. They packed in silence. Clara's fingers shook as she tied the canteen to her belt. She glanced at Toya's side. The bandage was dark now, soaked through. He moved slower, gritted his teeth when he bent to shoulder his pack, but said nothing. They started climbing, threading their way through the rock. The morning sun burned overhead, no clouds to veil its cruel eye. Toya led with his usual precision, choosing the high ground, keeping to stone where footprints wouldn't show. Clara followed, rifle slung across her back, eyes scanning constantly. It was near midday when they heard the whistle. Sharp. Human. Clara spun, heart hammering. Another whistle answered this time, farther to the right. Toya yanked her behind a boulder. They've flanked us. How far? He peered over the ridge. Too close. Gunfire exploded, 3 cracks in rapid succession. A bullet skipped off the rock near Clara's head, spraying her with dust. She ducked, heart pounding so hard it drowned out everything else. We run, Toya said. They bolted uphill, breath tearing in their throats. Clara slipped once, skinned her elbow, but didn't stop. More gunshots echoed behind them. Shouts followed. Don't let 'em get to the ridge. They veered left, scrambling up a steep incline. Clara's boots slipped on gravel. Toya reached back, grabbed her hand, yanked her up. His grip was strong, too strong for a man bleeding out. At the top of the hill, he stopped, swayed slightly. Clara caught him before he fell. We need to hide. He shook his head. No. We keep going. Your ribs don't matter. Not yet. They stumbled forward. The ridge fell away behind them, the terrain tightening into a pass that wound like a serpent between towering walls of red stone. Toya gestured toward a narrow cut in the canyon wall. There, he rasped. Old granary. My people used it long ago. She helped him inside. The space was small, but dry and shadowed. A narrow slit in the wall let in just enough light. They sank to the floor. Clara pressed her hand against the bandage again. Too much blood. You're going to pass out, she said. Toya leaned his head back. Then let me do it somewhere they won't find me. She tore open the canteen, soaked part of her shirt, and cleaned the wound again. He hissed through his teeth. I'm sorry, she said softly. He looked at her, eyes glassy. You've got nothing to be sorry for. His voice wavered at the edges, but not from pain. From something else. Fear maybe. Not of dying, but of leaving her alone in a world that wanted them apart. Clara pressed her forehead to his. I won't let them take you. Outside, footsteps crunched in the distance. She froze. Toya's eyes met hers. They're close. She moved to the entrance, rifle in hand. She watched as 2 figures came into view. One was Eli, his red hair unmistakable even from afar. He had a revolver in one hand and a smug grin on his lip. The other was a man Clara had never seen before, older, thick-bearded, eyes sunken and cold. The bounty hunter. They moved cautiously, scanning the ground. Toya whispered, That's Reeves. Fast. Mean. Clara adjusted her grip. I only need 1 shot. Make it count. Reeves paused suddenly. He squatted, touched something on the ground, then looked up at the canyon wall. His eyes narrowed. Clara held her breath. He pointed toward the granary. There. Eli raised his gun. Clara didn't hesitate. She fired. The shot rang out like thunder. Eli stumbled backward, his hat flying off. Not hit, but surprised. Reeves dove for cover. Clara ducked back inside, heart pounding. "Time to go," Toya muttered. They scrambled out the back, into a narrow slit of stone that twisted deeper into the canyon. Clara half dragged him. Bullets snapped behind them, ricocheting off the walls. One grazed her shoulder. She didn't feel it, only noticed when her sleeve went dark. Toya stumbled. She caught him again. They ran until the stone walls opened up into a hidden basin. The world felt quieter here, almost sacred. Cottonwood trees whispered in the breeze. A small spring trickled over rocks, clear and cold. But there was no time for wonder. Toya sank to his knees. Clara collapsed beside him. "This is it." He nodded. Almost safe. Almost wasn't enough. Footsteps echoed behind them, slow, methodical. She turned, rifle raised. Her father stood 10 paces away. No Eli. No Reeves. Just Samuel Wright, dusty and stiff, hat in one hand, revolver in the other. His eyes burned with something older than anger. "You've got my daughter," he said flatly. Toya didn't move. She came of her own will. "I didn't ask you, boy." Clara stepped between them. "You're not taking him." Samuel's face didn't change. "I raised you better than this." "No, you raised me afraid. And I'm not anymore." His gaze darkened. "You think this is love? This ain't love. It's disease. It's weakness. It's defiance dressed up as passion." Clara's voice shook with fury. "It's mine. You don't get to name it." He raised the revolver. "Step aside." She didn't. He cocked the hammer. "Last chance, Clara Bell." Toya, bleeding and breathless, pulled himself upright behind her. "You kill her, and you kill what's left of yourself." Samuel laughed, dry as gravel. "You don't know a damn thing about me." "I know men like you," Toya said, voice steady. "I've buried men like you." Samuel raised the gun. Clara squeezed the trigger. Her shot struck the revolver, knocking it from his hand. The old man shouted, more in rage than pain, and charged. She fired again, missed. Then he was on her, tackling her to the ground. The rifle skidded out of reach. His hands went for her throat. Toya roared, dragging himself forward, tackling Samuel off her. They rolled across the ground. Dust exploded around them. Toya struck hard, once, twice. But Samuel was bigger, fueled by fury. He slammed Toya's head against a stone. Clara lunged for the rifle. Samuel turned toward her, face bloodied. "I should have ended you the night I found out." She didn't answer. She fired. He jerked, eyes wide. Stumbled. Blood bloomed across his chest. He fell. Silence. Toya didn't move. Clara dropped the rifle and crawled to him. He was alive. Barely. His breath ragged, but there. She pressed her hand to his chest. "Stay. Please." He opened one eye. "Still here." She laughed, half-sob. "You better be." The spring babbled quietly behind them. The breeze picked up, warm and sweet. For the first time in days, they didn't have to run. Not yet. Not now. She looked back at her father's body. The past had bled out with him. And something new had begun. The sky blushed with the first pale hues of morning as Clara tightened the makeshift sling around Toya's shoulder. His face, still gaunt from pain and blood loss, held a quiet resilience. He didn't speak as she worked. He hadn't said much since the fight. Since her father's body had stilled beneath the cottonwoods and the past had cracked open like a thunderclap in the sky. Toya's breath hitched as she cinched the fabric. She paused, eyes flicking to his. "Too tight." He shook his head slowly. "Just right." He sat propped against the sandstone wall of the spring-fed basin, where the water still trickled, indifferent to the death it had witnessed. Clara sat back on her heels, brushing sweat-matted hair from her face. The sunlight pooled through the canyon like liquid gold, and the air carried a stillness that felt like the hush after thunder, fragile, sacred. She glanced toward the body now covered with a canvas tarp at the far edge of the clearing. "Should I bury him?" she asked, voice low. Toya's eyes didn't move. "That's for you to decide." She looked away. The man beneath that tarp had once lifted her into the air with laughing arms. He had once carved her name into a wooden block, taught her to ride. But he had also tried to kill her, kill them. He'd taught her that love had rules and walls, and stepping outside meant ruin. No, she would not bury him. Let the desert take what the desert had claimed. Instead, she turned her attention to the path ahead. How far now? She asked. Couple hours. If we go slow. She nodded. Then we go slow. It took most of the morning to break camp. Clara insisted on carrying their supplies. Toya, weakened but still upright, moved beside her, leaning heavily on a walking stick carved from a dried limb. They walked in silence, not because they had nothing to say, but because words suddenly felt small in the vastness of all that had happened. The trail rose gradually, winding along a ridge that offered long, open views of the basin behind them. The land felt wider now. Changed. Clara kept glancing backward, half expecting to see shapes on the horizon. Eli, Reeves, the past. But no one followed. They reached the crest near midday. From there, the world dropped away again, this time into a gentle valley brimming with green. A narrow stream curled like a silver ribbon between pine and aspen, and nestled at the far edge stood a structure Clara hadn't expected. A small lodge of stone and cedar logs, soot marks staining the chimney. Toya smiled faintly. Home. Clara felt her knees wobble. Not from fatigue. From the word. They descended slowly. Birds chattered in the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote barked once, then again. A white plume of smoke rose from the chimney. Toya's uncle had seen them coming. At the edge of the clearing, an old man emerged from the cabin, tall, lean, his hair silver and braided down his back. He didn't smile, but his eyes lit with something like recognition when he saw Toya. Nijoni, he said, voice rough like stone washed by river. You're late. Toya laughed, a dry, rasping sound. I brought company. The uncle's gaze turned to Clara, sharp and unreadable. She's not like the others, Toya said. She's earned this place. The old man said nothing. Then he stepped aside and motioned them inside. The cabin was small but sturdy. It smelled of cedar, earth, and tobacco. A fire crackled low in the hearth. The uncle set about boiling water, while Clara helped Toya to a straw-lined mat near the window. You'll stay? He asked quietly. She looked at him. Do you want me to? He reached for her hand, worn and bruised. Yes. Then I'll stay. The days passed gently after that. The old man, whose name was Hashtlish, tended to Toya with poultices and patience. Clara learned more than she expected. How to fetch water from the stream without muddying it. How to grind herbs into medicine. How to read the stars not for wishes but for warnings. She mended their clothes, swept the stone floor, cooked what little she could. Her bread still came out flat, but she smiled more when Toya teased her for it. Every night they sat by the fire. The stories came slowly. Hashtlish told them not for entertainment, but for understanding. He spoke of spirits, of the ancestors who walked before, of balance and silence, of what it meant to belong to something larger than blood or name. Clara listened, at first with curiosity, then with reverence. It was not the faith she'd been raised with. It had no sermons, no punishments, no wrath. It had space. One morning, she woke to find Toya already sitting outside, watching the sunrise. His color had returned, and the wound had begun to knit. She joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. Can I ask you something? She said. He nodded. Do you ever wish it had gone differently? That I hadn't dragged you into this? He looked at her slowly. You didn't drag me. I walked. She stared down at her hands. I killed him. My father. I keep hearing the shot in my sleep. You did what you had to do. I don't know if that makes it better. He didn't argue. That was something she loved about him. He didn't try to soothe lies into truth. He simply sat beside her, offering his presence like shelter. A week passed. Then another. On the 14th night, Hashtalish held a small gathering. Just the three of them. He burned juniper and sage. He painted symbols on their palms and spoke in Navajo, his voice steady and deep. When the smoke cleared, he turned to Clara. You carry fire. That's rare in settlers. You don't use it to burn. You use it to light. She didn't know what to say, so she only bowed her head. Later that night, under the blanket of stars, Toya took her hand again. We're safe now, he said. For how long? As long as we keep choosing each other. She leaned against him. I don't think I want to go back. There's nothing left to go back to. Then this is forward. He kissed her, slow and certain. The next morning, she began writing her own stories. She found old scraps of parchment in Hashtalish's trunk and ink made from crushed berries. Not just about what happened, but about who they were. About the wind, the rock, the feel of a heartbeat under her cheek. About a girl raised to be silent and obedient, who learned to fight with something fiercer than hate, love. Clara didn't know what the future would bring. There might still be riders on the horizon, bounty hunters with old grudges or lawmen who cared more about color than character. But here, in this hidden valley, time moved like water, slow, steady, and patient. Sometimes, when she stood outside the lodge and looked at the horizon, she could still hear her father's voice, bitter and sharp. But louder than that was the laughter that echoed through the trees when Toya told jokes in broken English, or the way Hashtalish hummed while carving. Louder was her own voice, unafraid now, telling tales to children from nearby camps who came to listen, wide-eyed and unblinking. One boy, not more than 6, once asked her, "Is it true you were once a settler girl?" She smiled. "I still am, in some ways. But I ran far enough to become something else, too." He grinned. "Like a coyote?" She laughed. "Maybe." The seasons began to turn. The days stretched long and hot, then grew crisp again. Clara stayed. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she had found the one place that didn't ask her to be less. At night, she still wrote by candlelight. Sometimes she addressed the pages to her mother, unsure if they would ever be read. She wrote not to forgive, but to understand. To remember. One evening, Toya returned from the trail with a carved pendant in his palm, stone smoothed into a spiral, threaded on sinew. "For you," he said. "So you remember who you are." She accepted it silently, and it felt like being seen. The story they'd begun in blood and flight hadn't ended in fire. It had turned into something quieter, but stronger. A story of endurance, of healing, of love. And one day, as the wind whistled down through the canyon, Clara sat at the edge of a cliff and looked out over the land that had tried to kill her. The narrator's voice, her voice, rose softly as if carried on the wind. In a land that chewed up dreams and spat out bones, 2 people dared to choose each other. Not because it was easy, not because it was safe, but because some loves aren't meant to be hidden. They're meant to burn bright, even if the world tries to snuff them out. And out here in the wild, under stars and wind, fire always finds a way.